Hello, everyone. Looks like we're starting with me first. I'd like to introduce Pastor Sam, who was supposed to introduce me. Hey, we're live. That's what we do. Pastor Sam, where are you? Are you around anywhere?
Let's see. Well, it looks like I'm hiding.
Listen, I know he's here. But what I'd like to do before Pastor Sam pops on is I welcome you all to Midweek Live. Thanks for joining us. Hey, there he is.
Hey. So welcome, Cornerstone, on behalf of Chris and myself to Midweek Live. If anyone doubts that God has a sense of humor, we're doing a series called Growing Through Adversity, and we decided to show up 20 minutes late, I guess. Fashionably late, I think. I mean, I don't know anything about fashion, but Chris Sotelo, my co-host, maybe you can say a little bit about fashion here. I don't know.
Well, as you can tell by this. Hey, well, look, Mark's here too. Wow, we're all here. I gotta say, this is hey, there's all three of us. Why not? Okay, well, there we go. All right, Pastor Sam. Hey, listen, it is great to be with you. Anything can happen on Midweek Live, and it's great to start with a bit of levity. I gotta say, in a week where it's felt a little rough. And before we get into today's message, we do want to set the table for you all, and just say that this midweek is going to feel a little different, as it should. It has been undoubtedly a really challenging time. We're grappling with our faith and how that faith is expressed in our lives. And if I'm completely honest, my heart has been really heavy with grief at the death of George Floyd and for the injustices by my black and experienced by my black brothers and sisters. And I just want to share two quick thoughts before we get started, if you'll indulge me. The first is this: I want to acknowledge that everyone's experiences are different and they're varied, right? As an Asian man, I can confirm that we as Asians are not a monolith. I'm Asian, but I'm a brown Asian. I'm Filipino. I'm Filipino American. And there are shared experiences, but there are varied perspectives. And so while I won't be able to fully understand the experiences of my black and brown brothers and sisters, I can listen. I can move forward in empathy, and I can speak up when people aren't being treated with dignity. And the second is this: I want to say that I don't claim to have the answers, but the one thing I know is that there is hope in Christ. There's transformative power in the Holy Spirit, and God is alive. And to those who believe, that Spirit that is alive in us to do that good work and to do that hard work, that's the Spirit that we abide by. So those are just some thoughts out the gate. Pastor Sam, do you have anything that you want to share?
Yeah, thank you for that, Chris. And I think as you and I talked this week, we talked about sort of not wanting to pretend that we have the answers for these things that are going on right now. Like everyone else, we're trying to sort through our own feelings, sort of trying to come alongside of our friends and community members and different people that we want to support and commiserate with and process through and try to figure out sort of the best way out of this and sort of coming alongside of whatever maybe how God can bring about good from it in some way, but not rushing past the real grief and need for justice and those kind of things as well. So so we are starting a little differently, not just because we started late, not just because of those little nuances that happen, but because there is a different tone to this week. Mm-hmm. And represented even, I'm here at the Mission campus again, and there's a protest going by outside. There's helicopters in the air, but we felt like being here was representative of there's sort of outer turmoil, but trying to, at our core, coming into a place where we can connect with God, and wanting to sort of invite people to do that, spiritually. While again, there's stuff happening outside, but we want to try to represent that, connect with that, and sort of push into that in ways that God can burst forth.
Amen. So, amen. Yeah. And we're here to guide you through this week's message. We've got another great one coming from the Growing Through Adversity series. If you've been with us through this Midweek Live, we've been going through this series called Growing Through Adversity. And just as a disclaimer, this series is actually 3 years old. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through several different clips. And as we go through those clips, it's going to take us to a place where, the things that we'll be talking about are, just as relevant now as they were then, if not more so. And so the message that we're going to go through tonight is called Weakness, the Gift That Nobody Wants. And it's going to be talking about the Apostle Paul and how he reveals, Christ's strength that works through adversity. And so as we get into this first clip, just to set the table a little bit, Pastor Terry is going to really just kind of, set us up for, the rest of the sermon. So as he lays the groundwork here, this is what's going to be important for how we're going to dialogue about it as we continue on with the service. So let's go ahead and roll that first clip.
What is weakness? The idea from first to last is of inadequacy. We talk about physical weakness. When we say how someone's physically weak, we mean that they have a lack of vigor or energy and perhaps bodily health so that one cannot, move furniture or tackle heavy yard jobs. So we say physically I'm limited, I'm weak. I don't have any strength. Might be feeling sick or ill. Personal weakness, indicating thereby that a person lacks resolution, firmness of character, dignity, the capacity to command. So there's a personal weakness. They don't have any real fiber. They're not a strong person. They're a weak person. They kind of cave under things, right? We talk about a weak position when a person lacks needed resources and cannot move situations forward or influence events as desired. Oh, they're in a weak position. They don't have any leverage. They're totally capable of being taken advantage of. Weak. Or when we talk about relational weakness, when a person who should be leading and guiding fails to do so, we say there's weak parents. They're not taking responsibility, or a weak pastor, not leading well, or a weak manager. You see, the idea is that someone's not stepping forward and being responsible. If you think about it this way, weakness, there are no statues built to the weak. Look, check them out. It's like you will not see it. We see, go down to AT&T, you'll see great achievers, right? Different parts of the city, conquerors, overcomers, people who led things and people followed them. I mean, you'll see all that stuff, but you're not going to see too many things in honor of the weak, the defeated, the non-performer, right? The shy, the timid. No, it doesn't work that way. There are no statues erected to celebrate the defeated. No statues to honor the inferior. Speaking of inferior, I remember in Packer's book, he went on to talk about a Peanuts cartoon. Some of you are familiar with Lucy and Charlie Brown, right? And he was talking about how, and by the way, Lucy, boy, she's a piece of work, right? Not normally known for anything resembling empathy, right? It's the exact opposite. And of course, so Lucy asks a gloomy-looking Charlie Brown, what are you worrying about? And Charlie says, well, I feel inferior. And Lucy says, you shouldn't worry about that. Lots of people have that feeling. What? That they're inferior? No, Lucy replies, that you're inferior. That's what they have. They feel that way all the time. It's a great line. And the thing about it, I was going, what's wrong with me? I really like that. That was funny to me. All right? But the idea is that I think, as Packer points out, is vintage Lucy mocking Charlie's gloomy distress and endorsing his sadly self-resigned assessment of his inferiority. But the fact is, a lot of us do struggle with our confidence, with our own sense of inferiority, perhaps, or at least an abiding sense of weakness in our life. There may be areas in our lives where we're ashamed of. We feel limited by them. They're hurtful. They may be unique to us, but they're real. Sometimes they're connected to a loss, something that we're losing. But this idea of weakness has to do with things that we wish we could change, and we feel kind of powerless to do it. That's what we're talking about.
Wow, I think that last thing that Pastor Terry ended with, this idea that weakness is the things that we wish we could change, but we're powerless to do it. What do you think of that definition there, Pastor Sam?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things there that talking about no one wants to be considered weak, right? And we find ourselves sometimes in weak positions. And that, I guess, that resonates a lot with right now. I mean, the need for change is obvious. The things that are going on around us, there's so many things in our culture and different places that are evidence or give evidence to the need for change. And I think as believers too, like we know what the world could be at its best, or we have glimpses of it, and we wish it were more that way. And we struggle with, not having the ability to enact world peace or feed the hungry, worldwide, and those kind of things. And it can be overwhelming, and we can wrestle with, what can I do as a single person? But at the same time, there are those glimpses of when we have those powerful conversations with somebody that, dig into their story and set something free, or encourage them to step into something fully as who they are, and casting off the shame or things that limit them. And then we can see like what that power of one can do, on a micro scale. And then when somebody leads intentionally and boldly and in the right direction, it can transform the world. And we've seen different people do that over the centuries. And Jesus, a great example of that for sure.
Yeah, I think that it's truly, it truly resonates, this idea that like weakness is not something anyone wants, right? No one wants to be weak. Like Pastor Terry said, no one builds a monument to the weak, right? Or feeling powerless. These are all negative feelings, but it is, as you were saying, it is an interesting entry point that to allow Jesus to work in the midst of that. And there is something that he can do in the midst of that as well. So I totally agree with you there.
Yeah. And yeah, I think kind of where we're going to go next, we'll dig into a little bit of where Paul, shares, and Pastor is going to dig into Paul's story, where he lists off these things that he's been through as a way of explaining how he can identify with other people who have gone through struggle and contended for things that matter. And then there's sort of a second piece of that where he's going to share a little bit of how we can kind of connect with that and what was the outcome of having gone through those things. So let's go to that clip and we'll come back afterwards.
Now he's going to go for a shot here. After all, you think you're so wise, but you enjoy putting up with fools. So I guess it shouldn't be a problem for you. You put up with it when someone enslaves you, takes everything you have, takes advantage of you, takes control of you, and slaps you in the face. I'm ashamed to say we've been too weak to do that. In other words, you had these hardline teachers who were coming in very authoritarian ways, and they were asserting themselves dramatically. Paul says, using figurative language, I mean, they're like, you see what these guys are doing to you? They're strong-arming you. They're slapping you around, and yet you take it. But me, who I come in soft, trying to just make the case, you treat me like I'm some weakling. They're saying I'm weak because I'm reasonable. And I'm trying to appeal to you in love, not manipulate you by misusing my authority. And because of that, you reject me? That's what he's saying. All right? I guess then I am weak. But watch what follows. But whatever they dare to boast about, and I'm talking, here I go again. I dare boast about it too. They say they're Hebrews. Well, guess what? So am I. He's talking about the pedigree to qualify him as a teacher of the message of Jesus that went back into the Older Testament. He goes, they say, are they Israelites? You know what? So am I. Are they descendants of Abraham? Guess what? So am I. Are they servants of Christ? I know I sound like a madman, but I'm telling you, I have served him. I don't like doing this. I hate comparing myself with other people who follow Jesus. That's the worst thing you can do. But I'm going to tell you right now, I've served him far more than they ever have. I've worked harder. I've been put in prison more often, been whipped times without number, faced death again and again. 5 different times the Jewish leaders gave me 39 lashes, which was the legal allowance. That was the height of the legal allowance. You couldn't give more than that. He says, and I faced death. I mean, I've been whipped times without number. I've worked harder. I've been put in prison. I faced death again and again. 5 different times the Jewish leaders gave me 39 lashes. 3 times I've been beaten with rods, almost to a point of death. Once I was stoned with rocks, left for dead. 3 times I was shipwrecked. Once I spent a whole night and day adrift at sea. That is scary. I've traveled on many long journeys. I've faced danger from river crossings and from robbers, bandits. I've faced danger from my own people, the Jews, as well as from the Gentiles. I've faced danger in the cities, I'm telling you, in the deserts, on the seas, and I have faced danger from men who claim to be believers, but they are not. I have worked hard and long, enduring many sleepless nights. I've been hungry and thirsty, and I've gone without food. I have shivered in the cold with not enough clothing to keep me warm. And then on top of all of this, I have the daily burden, the weight of my concern for all the churches. Who is weak, he says. Who is weak? Look at that phrase there. I'm telling you. He says, who is weak without me feeling weakness? Do you think, but he basically says, I can relate to people who are in trouble. I understand what that's like. The one thing I can do is I can relate to people who are at the end of the rope because I've been there many times on behalf of Christ. And I know what it's like to feel weak and desperate. And look at that. And who has led us astray and I do not burn with anger? You understand what he's saying? He's saying, one, don't confuse, I do care. Yes, my suffering has softened me to people. That's true. Two, I'll tell you what can get angry about real fast, is when I see false teachers leading people into spiritual places that are going to destroy them. He goes, makes me burn with anger. It bothers me when people get duped, tricked, manipulated, and led off course. And he's making the point, tricked into sin. He says, it makes me angry. That's his passion. He goes, so if I'm going to boast about the things that show how weak I am. Yeah, if I have to brag, I'll brag about the humiliations that make me more like Jesus. And you know what? God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who is worthy of eternal praise, he knows I am not lying. I am telling you the truth. That's powerful. Whew. Okay, let's take it. Let's apply it. Let's do this. Paul's suffering had made him more empathetic, and it forged in him a kind of sympathy for others who struggled in weakness and suffered. I particularly refer to that 29th verse where he says, who is weak without me feeling that weakness? A lot of times we think Paul's this hard guy, but the truth is he was being accused of being soft. And part of the reason he is soft, he says, you think these things in my life, they've made me hard, and they have. I know how to suffer for God. He goes, but the truth is they've also created in me, honestly, a love for people who struggle with things and who are weak and who are suffering. That matters to me. And I can't help but thinking about it. Things like suffering, things like loss, limitations in our lives when we have to deal with stuff, or weakness, when we just don't have it. Or some of us, we're dealing with that as we're aging. Or we're facing things that just remind us that, man, I just don't have the resources other people have. Or why isn't this happening for me? And that, listen, when we go through seasons like that, you know what's going to happen usually? We're either going to get, I'm going to say it, harder or softer. We won't come out the same. The adversity that we often talk about, that we want to grow through, that we're not coming out the same. And when we're in an extended season of it, we're either going to come out, I know this has been said many times, we're either going to come out better or we're going to come out bitter. And I know what God wants. He wants that for all of us. I've noticed that it tends to make people, when we're under a hard place, when we're experiencing loss or weakness in our lives, feel like we're being on the short end of the stick, we're either going to get usually edgier, meaner, harder to be with, or we're going to move towards, if the Lord has His way, becoming more compassionate, more tender, and more sensitive to others because we understand. You see, there's such a thing as what I call the fellowship of the wounded. And when we really understand what it's like to hurt, it's hard for us to be unsympathetic to others who are hurting. It doesn't mean everybody's got the same situation. We're all different. But there's something about it. And the ultimate example of the leader of the band, if you will, is Jesus. Because He suffered and He was wounded for our transgressions. He is the model of how to move through things victoriously or in a way that prevails.
I love that. Love that second clip. And I love that term that Pastor Cherry used, the fellowship of the wounded, right? This idea that when we understand what it's like to hurt, it's harder for us to be unsympathetic. That idea that Paul's suffering made him more empathetic in a sense. And as the saying goes, I've heard it, and you've probably heard it too, Pastor Sam, but hurt people, heal people, right? It also reminds me, and speaking of learning to be a little bit more empathetic, My wife and I are actually celebrating our 12th wedding anniversary coming up this weekend. That's right.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. 12 years married, but 21 years being together. It's a long time. I know. One thing I've learned over that amount of time is how to be a better listener. In other words, I've been a terrible listener. So I've had to learn how to be a better listener. I mean, there were countless times when I thought I'd be helping her out by being quick to give advice or an inspirational quote. But what I wasn't doing was I wasn't joining her in her pain, right? A lot of times I start out my statements like this, and you may have done this. Maybe you're a far better husband than I am, or a better listener. But that phrase, well, at least, well, you got a problem. Well, at least we got our jobs. At least we're healthy. At least we're not sick. And I'm reminded then of my shortcoming, as Brene Brown put it, like empathy rarely starts with the words "at least," right? Fixing the problem, it's not the solution, right? Giving pithy advice, that's not it. But sometimes there's just power in listening, and power in learning to feel what the other person is feeling, and getting proximate to those who are suffering and marginalized. And something I did earlier this week on Monday was actually I put to practice what my faith had compelled me to do, and I as a member of the Fellowship of the Wounded, I showed up to the Kneel-In rally at City Hall. And, I did that to join people in their pain, right? And it was a peaceful gathering. We grieved together. We listened. We prayed. We sang. We kneeled. And it was just important for me to build that bridge to empathy. Yeah.
That's really powerful. And one of the things that, as we were talking last night, kind of going over what we're going to discuss tonight a little bit, we do like a little pre-service thing. And Phil, who we'll see up here in a little bit, mentioned Brene Brown as well, and kind of the idea that sympathy is, if you see somebody in a hole, you walk by and you're like, oh, I'm sorry you're in a hole.
Yeah.
But empathy is actually climbing down into the hole and actually, sort of experiencing it and saying, oh man, this stinks, or this sucks. And so trying to engage, in a way that allows us to borrow from our own experiences. We can't really know what somebody else is experiencing. We don't know their past. We don't know the things they've been through, the traumas, the different things that influence how a given thing affects them. But we can draw from our experiences, like the Apostle Paul was doing, the hardships he had been through. He knew pain. He had been through physical pain. He had been through emotional pain. He had been rejected. Just like Jesus, knows our suffering because he's gone through all these things and experienced them, so that he could be the ultimate one who would walk with us through anything that we go through in our lives. And I think it's important, like you were saying, Chris, the idea that we can't truly know the diversity of experience that somebody is experiencing because of their past, but we can listen. We can try to really hear what they have to say, and it's most effective, I think, when that's going both directions, right? Yeah. And in this time, I think a lot of people are trying to be helpful, and maybe just that idea of feeling powerless and feeling weak because of that, not knowing what to do, how to help, what to say. A real dialogue can open up the doors for inviting people into that as well, which brings healing.
Absolutely, and shimmying right up to somebody and just saying, "Hey, that really sounds hard. That really sounds hard for you," and how that can just open up so many doors. In that regard, we've got one more clip this evening, and as we walk through this last clip, and this is about how compassion can develop in our own life through adversity, and where we can go from there. So consider this kind of the application of what we've been talking about tonight. So here we go.
And one of the things we'll see is that God uses things sometimes that are as weakness in our life as a way of binding Him to us and vice versa. So we'll leave it with this last piece, and we'll put it up there. It seems so obvious, but in the Christian life, listen, loved ones, let's never forget this. The spiritual strength is always connected to weakness, or at least frequently is. Remember, Paul's critics are saying, oh, you're weak. And by the time Paul's done, he's going to accept the accusation. He's going to wave it like a flag, right? He's going to start saying, this is the secret sauce to my spiritual strength. Weakness. What? Weakness? Paul writes this later on. You're going to see it in 2 Corinthians 12. He says, therefore I'll take pleasure in infirmities, reproaches, in needs and persecutions and distresses for Christ's sake. Key phrase at the back end. In his case, it was because he suffered for Christ. It could be other types of suffering, like the relational one he was having with the church at Corinth. He goes, for when I am weak, then I am strong. Whoa, what did you just say? When I am weak, then I am strong? That is like both paradoxical and counterintuitive. It's certainly countercultural because we honor the strong. But God says weakness is a gift, even though it may not look like one. Because weakness tends to bring two things if we open our lives. One, it tends to make us more open to God. I'll put it this way, not just open. We start casting our care in his direction. It's like, the harder it is, if you do it, it starts moving us naturally towards the Lord. We're way more open than I was. And then the other thing that happens is God, in turn, casts something our way called grace. We cast our gaze towards him. He casts grace in our direction. And what that starts to happen is things start to transform in us. It's like stuff starts to grow. And all of a sudden, strength emerges in zones that have always been our weakness. And all of a sudden, we're wrestling still, and we're struggling still, and we have our ups and downs, but we're starting to see change, and we're seeing growth, and we're seeing things like the Lord's faithfulness showing up in our lives, and we're seeing, man, this works in my life. And all of a sudden, I'm finding myself in a very different kind of a mindset because I'm learning how to trust him, because what we realize is that God is capable of sustaining us, transforming us, and redeeming us. And redeeming means, and I love this one, he takes the bad and brings good from it. That is huge. And so I'll leave it with this. I think the Christian life tends to flourish when we, if I can say it this way, and again, countercultural, distrust our own goodness and capacities. That we say, you know what, I'm not my self-made. I have limits. I have weak areas. It's okay. It's good. That is the blessed one. The fool, God says, has said in their heart, I don't need God. There is no God. I am my God. I was reading somebody's blog, and because they were struggling with something that was so hard for them around their identity, that they were disowning Jesus and like letting God go. And as I was reading, I was going, all you've done is make yourself God. I just pushed him out and I put myself on the pedestal. Now I am God. It's like, no, that's the exact opposite. It wasn't meant to pull you away from God. It was meant to draw you towards him. Distrust our own goodness and capacities. Embrace our weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Listen, not because they are good, but because God can bring good from them. 3, rely on God, right? Cultivate dependence as a way of life. And if I had a 4th point, I would say, and you know what? Stay optimistic and hopeful, because when the Lord is with us, there is nothing ever that is truly dead. Because wherever God is, and I'll say this again later, wherever God isn't, there is death. But wherever God is, there is life.
Wow, that's powerful. The idea of acknowledging our weaknesses and that bringing strength to us, that it's such a paradox that it's hard to want to do that and then invite God into it and stuff. But the idea of weakness, acknowledging weakness and embracing weakness being a strength. We had talked about this, but what do you or how have you seen that show up in real life?
Yeah, so it's a timely question because I've got this friend of mine, and he was one of my groomsmen, and he's a dear brother in Christ, a dear friend of almost 20 years now. And like I said, we've been through the fire. We came up through the University of Illinois Education Department together. We were like simultaneously going on our path of teaching, and then he went off to like inspire the youth. We both have a heart for youth, and like I said, he's a dear brother. And he and I have been chatting about how he's been processing things that he's been seeing as a black man and also as a Christian. And he's actually given me permission to share this conversation that I've had with him, and he said, I hope that it encourages someone today. So I'm going to be reading some texts that he and I shared. And if you want to talk about hardship and you want to talk about weakness, my friend is someone who's already immunocompromised, so he has difficulty breathing, but then he got sick with COVID-19 symptoms in April. And then he lost his job. And then on top of that, now he has to deal with just the injustice of these killings and racism. And it pains me because he's my brother, he's a dear brother of mine. And we were chatting last night, and he said, he's like, I'm fighting to stay hopeful, and God is drawing me close and in a new way. These protests have stirred up a lot of emotions for me. As a Black man, it's triggering. And a strong reminder that there is a racist system against me. I'm praying that this is going to be a turning point for church in America. My follow-up question was, how have you been able to hold on to your faith through this? Because I was so concerned about him. And he said, and he said this so perfectly in line with what we've been talking about today. He said, man, my brokenness has just made me turn to him. And to be honest with you, I'm just so honest with him in my prayers. And even if I'm angry, through it all, he keeps doing things to remind me of his love. He's blessed me with an incredible church family, a band of brothers, the pastoral care team I get to serve on, and I've got finances for the next few months. And with all this, I've been asking him to use me. He's using my hurt, my joy, my victories, my struggles, and my gifts to encourage and talk to others every week. I'm so unworthy of that. I know it's no one but God. And then I said this to him. I said, brother, only people who are marked by the Holy Ghost can think this way. He is truly a way maker and a miracle worker. And he said, praise God. Believe me, I've cried a lot in the past few months, but he's truly my comfort. That's God's work.
Yeah. It's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Chris. And now, just as we sit with that, and perhaps we know people who are walking through things like that as well. One of the greatest things that we can do is just cry out to God for strength. And Phil's going to share a song now that sort of lets us sit in that a little bit.
Pastor Terry said up front that no one's ever built a statue to someone who was weak, and yet as a boy, I often remember in Catholic Church, the only statue I would see would be Jesus on the cross, and I would think, why is this person so helpless? Why is he weak? And little did I know that was actually the strongest act that a person could make, not a weak one. I tried to stand my ground, tried to understand. I can't seem to find my faith again. Like water on the sand, or grasping at the wind, I keep on falling short. Please be my strength. Please be my strength, 'cause I don't have any more. I don't have any more. I'm looking for a place where I can plant my faith. One thing I know for sure, I cannot create it and I cannot sustain it. It's your love that's keeping me. So please be my strength. Please be my strength, 'cause I don't have any more. I don't have any more. And at my final breath, I hope that I can say I fought the good fight of faith. I pray your glory shine in this doubting heart of mine, and all would know that you are my strength. You are my strength, you and you alone. Keep me back home. Oh, you are my strength. You are my strength, you and you alone. Keep bringing me back home. You and you alone. Keep bringing me back home.
Oh, there's multiple of me for a second there. That expresses how much of me wants to thank you for that beautiful song, Phil. Thank you for joining us. And quick question: do you do home calls and or bar mitzvahs? It's okay. You don't have to answer that. He's nodding his head. Yes, he does. He does. He does. He does those performances. But again, thank you. Thank you all for joining us. Hey, listen, we're about to wrap up our midweek live service, but we want to thank you all for tuning in. We know that, it's live. It's live, baby. You got to roll with the punches. I had my Kleenex prepared though. Who knew what would happen today? So that's what we got going on. Sam, I told you it's live. Sam is muted.
I was testing y'all. Thank you, Chris, for sharing that story. It's so powerful, and thank you, Phil, for being with us here tonight to share that song. Also, as Phil was playing, I was reminded that the definition of compassion is to suffer with, and this is a season where we're being, I think, in a lot of ways, called to go through, all the things of the season together, to celebrate together, to suffer together, to sort of process things together, and through that, as we lean into God and support each other in that. That intention and that passion, that desire, will come out of it better for maybe the world will even be in a better place because of it. So that's our hope for sure. And then one of the ways we can connect with each other, we try to provide different opportunities throughout the week. And this Friday we have Instagram live worship again.
Always happy to have you, Cornerstone fam. And we love y'all. Pastor Sam, if they can't hear us, they can see this.
Yeah. Hopefully see you next Wednesday. All right. God
Bye,
bless
y'all.
Ramblers in the wilderness, we can't find what we need. We get a little restless from the searching, get a little worn out in between. Like a bull chasing the matador, is a man left to his own schemes. Everybody needs someone beside him, looking like a lighthouse from the sea. Brother, let me be your shelter. I'll never leave you all alone. I can be the one you call when you're low. Brother, let me be your fortress when the night winds are driving on. I'll be the one to light the way, bring you home. Face down in the desert now, there's a cage locked around my heart. I found a way to drop the keys where the failures were. Now my hands can't reach that far. Well, I ain't made for rivalries. I could never take the world alone. I know that in my weakness I am strong, but it's your love that brings me home. And brother, let me be your shelter. I'll never leave you all alone. I could be the one you call when you're low. And brother, let me be your fortress when the night winds are driving on. I'll be the one to light the way, bring you home. And when you call and need me here, through it all. Brother, let me be your shelter. I'll never leave you all alone. I can be the one you call when you're low.